town of Rehoboth. Been charged with murder, assault and battery on a pregnant victim.
It never starts with violence, not at first. In every case you are about to hear, there is a moment, small, barely noticeable, when a relationship shifts. A moment when something inside a partner changes shape. A message typed just a little too angrily, a stare held just a little too long, a sudden obsession with where she goes, who she talks to, what she posts. And in all 10 stories, there is one detail that binds them together. Every victim tried to leave. That is the moment when smiles fall away, when apologies fade, when a boyfriend becomes something else entirely. One of them refreshed his victim's social media page again and again as he followed her car. Another streamed his grief online while standing over a scene he created. One searched for ways to disappear a body hours before the crime. Another told his friends calmly that the breakup would not stand. And one man, the first in our story, walked directly toward a woman he once claimed to love, while holding a knife he had purchased days earlier after searching for it online. This is where our descent begins, with a breakup, a gym parking lot, and a young woman who did everything right, but never saw how far an obsessed ex-boyfriend would go. That boyfriend was Joshua Stimpson, June of 2017, Chatham, Kent. A pale morning hangs low over the Dockside Shopping Center as early shoppers drift in and out of the parking lot. The air is cool, the sky muted. The kind of morning where nothing feels rushed and everything moves in slow, predictable rhythms. Inside a nearby gym, 23-year-old university student Molly McLaren wipes sweat from her forehead and looks around quietly, unaware that the most dangerous moment of her life is waiting just minutes ahead. She finishes her workout, adjusts her ponytail, screws the cap back onto her water bottle, and checks her phone. She messages her friends that she is heading out, adding a casual comment about needing food, needing rest, needing a moment to breathe. What she does not know is that her former boyfriend, 26-year-old Joshua Stimpson, is already outside the building. He has been there before she arrived. He has been following her for days, tracking her routines, watching which entrance she uses and which direction she drives home. He has been posting messages online designed to tear at her confidence, to humiliate her, to pull her back into a relationship she has already escaped. In the quiet of his own home, he has taken photos of himself holding a knife. He has searched for what different blades can do to the human body. He has ignored every warning sign, every police interaction, every boundary Molly tried to build. Their relationship never began with danger. It began with the small spark of online flirtation, messages late at night, jokes about music, plans for the future that felt warm and hopeful. Molly liked the attention at first. He seemed interested, invested, even sweet. But the tone changed quickly. His messages multiplied. He became defensive when she did not respond immediately. He accused her of pulling away. He demanded explanations for things that needed none. His intensity stopped feeling romantic and started feeling suffocating. Friends noticed first. They asked Molly if she was all right. She shrugged it off, like so many do. No one expects affection to turn into obsession, but it did. Stimpson began posting cryptic comments online, implying that Molly had mistreated him. He sent her messages that unsettled her. He wrote strange, threatening captions under photos. Molly blocked him, then unblocked him when he approached her with apology after apology. She told friends she wanted the situation to calm down. She tried to end things gently, cautiously, respectfully. But when she finally broke up with him on good terms, Stimpson did not take it as an ending. He took it as an attack. She contacted police 48 hours before her death. She told them he frightened her, that he was following her online and in person, that he would not let go. She hoped that would be the end of it. She hoped everything would simply fade. But the next morning, he followed her car to the gym. When Molly walked back through the parking lot toward her vehicle, she saw him from a distance, a small shape standing near the rows of parked cars. She sent a message to her friends saying she felt uneasy. The tone of her final messages is heartbreaking, calm but anxious, trying not to escalate anything, trying to stay rational. She climbed into her car. Stimpson moved quickly. He reached her door. He pulled it open before she could lock it. The attack was immediate. Witnesses sprinted toward the vehicle, shouting for him to stop. One man pounded on the car window, trying to break through the barrier of glass and violence. Another tried to restrain Stimpson physically, but in just seconds, he stabbed Molly repeatedly with the kitchen knife he had purchased days earlier. By the time bystanders dragged him away, Molly's injuries were catastrophic. When police arrived, they found him standing near the open door, his clothes stained, his expression strangely flat, like a man who believed he had completed something he had played out in his mind many times before. What followed in the investigation made the truth impossible to deny. Stimpson had researched knives. He had written posts attacking Molly. He had followed her movements. He had planned his approach. He had chosen his moment. He had ignored police warnings, the pleas of friends, the desperation in Molly's attempts to distance herself. At trial, Stimpson claimed diminished responsibility, but psychiatric experts found no evidence of an acute episode. His actions were deliberate. His decisions were calculated. The buildup was documented across social media, search history, eyewitness accounts, and Molly's own messages. The jury convicted him of murder. He received a life sentence, with a minimum term of more than 26 years. Inside the courtroom, Molly's family held each other tightly. Her parents listened as prosecutors described the final days of their daughter's life, days she spent trying to protect herself from someone she once trusted. She had recognized the warning signs. She had pleaded for help. She had done everything right. But sometimes the shift inside a partner is not loud. It is quiet. It is subtle. It is hidden beneath apologies and promises and soft voices that mask something dark and immovable. Before we continue deeper into the remaining stories, take a breath. If you want to hear the rest of these cases told in this calm, cinematic style, make sure you subscribe. It helps more than you know. And while you are here, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Because the pattern that appeared in Molly's story, the moment when leaving becomes dangerous, returns in the next case. But this time, the world witnesses the aftermath not in silence, but online, in real time, through images that should never have been seen. July of 2019. Utica, New York. A warm summer night hangs over the city as headlights drift along quiet residential streets. Inside a dark-colored SUV parked beneath a line of maple trees, a 19-year-old girl named Bianca Devins sits beside a man she barely knows. A man she believed was simply a friend, someone she trusted enough to attend a concert with. What she cannot see in the dim glow of the dashboard is that the man beside her, 21-year-old Brandon Clark, is already unraveling. For her, he is just a date, but in his head, he is her boyfriend. His breathing is heavy. His hand grips his phone, and behind the calm expression he shows her, something inside him is splitting open. To understand how they reached this moment, you have to go back weeks earlier to the way their connection began. Bianca was a teenager who had recently graduated from high school. She built online communities, sketched artwork, shared her thoughts, and spoke openly about mental health. She had friends who adored her, a family who supported her, and an audience of followers who saw her as a bright, creative presence. Clark entered her life through that world, the online spaces where she connected with others. He was older, a bit awkward, often seeking validation. At first, he acted like a protective friend, someone who wanted to help, someone who cared. But underneath that surface was insecurity, jealousy, and the need for control. He read too deeply into their conversations. He interpreted friendliness as commitment. He believed proximity was possession. In the days leading up to the crime, Bianca made it clear that they were not in a relationship. She went to a concert with him as a friend, not as a partner. At the show, she spent time with another young man. Normal behavior for any 19-year-old, but not for Clark. Witnesses there later recalled him pacing, watching her, growing tense. In pictures taken that night, Bianca looks carefree, unaware that the man behind her is spiraling into something irreversible. After the concert, they returned to Utica. Clark drove. Bianca, tired and trusting, believed the night was winding down. Instead, it was reaching its most dangerous point. Clark had already posted alarming messages online, already hinted at self-harm, already written things that suggested the night would end violently. No one could see his exact intentions, not yet. But the digital trail shows a man moving toward a catastrophic decision. When they parked, Bianca fell asleep for a moment. She woke to Clark confronting her, accusing her, twisting the events of the evening into some narrative of betrayal. The argument escalated quickly. She told him she was not his partner. She told him he had no claim over her. For most men, those words would have ended the conversation. For Clark, they ignited the very obsession he had been feeding for weeks. The attack happened fast. Clark reached for a weapon he had brought. He struck before Bianca had a chance to escape. The violence was immediate, overwhelming, and final. She fought. She tried to shield herself, but she could not overpower a man determined to take her life. When it was over, Clark did something that horrified the world. He took photos. He posted them online. He wrote captions designed to provoke shock, attention, and sympathy. He sent messages to servers, to acquaintances, to strangers. He tried to paint himself as broken, as victimized, as devastated, all while standing over the harm he had inflicted. The images spread across social media within minutes. Friends of Bianca saw them before police did. Some thought it was a sick prank. Some begged Clark online to stop. Others called emergency services in a panic. Bianca's family was notified before they even understood what had happened. Clark attempted to stage a dramatic ending for himself as police arrived, injuring his own neck before officers intervened. He survived. He was arrested on the spot. The scene, the photos, the timestamps, and the digital footprint left no room for interpretation. In the following days, the community mourned a young woman whose life had been defined not by darkness, but by creativity, kindness, and resilience. Vigils were held. Artwork was shared. Friends spoke about Bianca as someone who made others feel seen. Her family emphasized her intelligence, her humor, her empathy. Clark's online behavior became central evidence. He had posted the images intentionally. He had documented his actions. He had created a timeline that showed planning, anger, jealousy, and a desire for attention. There were no mysteries left to solve. He pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to a prison term of more than 25 years to life. But the impact of the case went beyond the courtroom. It prompted national conversations about digital violence, obsessive behavior, online boundaries, and the way parasocial attachments can twist into possession. Platforms were pressured to respond faster to harmful content. Mental health advocates spoke about recognizing early warning signs, not only in relationships, but in the way people behave online when entitlement mixes with insecurity. Bianca's family pushed for laws to prevent the spread of graphic crime images. They worked tirelessly to ensure her name would never be defined by the violence she suffered, but by the life she lived. The community rallied behind them, refusing to allow Clark's online posts to overshadow who Bianca truly was. And beneath it all lies the same pattern that began this series. A young woman tries to set boundaries. A man refuses to accept them. Possession replaces respect. Obsession replaces reality. And the moment she pulls away becomes the moment everything turns dangerous. The next case follows that same pattern, but with a different type of escalation. Not digital, not public, but rooted in sudden rage and the shattering of a fragile ego in a Florida home where fear arrived without warning. October of 2020. Bartow, Florida. A quiet neighborhood sits under the heavy stillness of early evening as porch lights flicker on, one by one. Inside a small rental home, 26-year-old Vanessa Sykes moves through her living room with the kind of tension that comes from weeks of unease. She has been distancing herself from her boyfriend, 35-year-old Christopher Pequeen, after a series of unsettling outbursts. Friends know she has been scared. Her family knows she has been trying to leave. What no one knows, not yet, is that Pequeen has reached a breaking point. The shift in his behavior did not begin that night. It began long before. Pequeen had a documented history of volatility. Law enforcement had responded to domestic incidents involving him before, including accusations that he had pinned Vanessa down, smashed her belongings, and acted with sudden bursts of aggression that left her terrified. According to reports, she once searched online for ways to safely leave a violent partner, a detail investigators would later find in her digital history. That quiet search sits like a warning, a message she never had the chance to say aloud. Despite her fear, Vanessa tried to handle things carefully. She minimized conflict. She tried to keep the peace. She tried to avoid triggering his anger. Many victims do the same, hoping that calm will soften a storm, hoping distance will fix what fear cannot. But Pequeen was unraveling. What Vanessa saw as safety, he saw as rejection. And rejection ignited something dark. On the evening of the attack, Pequeen arrived at her home in Bartow, already seething. He had been drinking. He had argued with her before. He had shown flashes of resentment and paranoia. When he entered the house, the argument escalated immediately. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting, then a sudden quiet that made the next moments even more terrifying. Pequeen confronted Vanessa, rage tightening around him like a vice. In the confusion and fear, one longtime roommate tried to intervene, stepping between them, attempting to calm Pequeen or at least deflect the danger. Instead of de-escalating, Pequeen turned the violence outward. He pulled out a firearm and shot the roommate, critically wounding him as he tried to escape. The man managed to flee the home, collapsing outside while trying to call for help. Inside, Vanessa was alone with someone who no longer saw her as a partner or even as a person. Only as an object he believed he was losing. The final moments of Vanessa's life were brutal and swift. Pequeen attacked her as she tried to run. According to responding officers, she suffered fatal wounds before she had any chance to break free. By the time first responders arrived, alerted by the injured roommate and frantic neighbors, Vanessa was already gone. Pequeen fled the scene. He drove away with speed and panic, leaving behind a trail of devastation. But he did not make it far. Police tracked him through witness statements, vehicle descriptions, and the chaos he left behind. When officers located him, he surrendered without the violent resistance they had prepared for. The contrast was chilling. The fury he unleashed on Vanessa replaced by a hollow resignation only hours later. As investigators pieced together the timeline, a disturbing pattern emerged. Past domestic violence reports, statements from friends who said Vanessa feared him, digital evidence showing her researching how to escape an abusive situation, a history of aggression that escalated the moment she tried to distance herself. The prosecution's case was strong. They presented witness testimony, medical evidence, the roommate's account, and a clear sequence of actions showing deliberate intent. Pequeen, cornered by his own choices, denied certain details but could not outrun the facts. The violence was not random, it was not impulsive. It was the culmination of control slipping away. In court, the contrast between Vanessa's bright, hopeful life and the anger that consumed Pequeen was impossible to ignore. She had dreams, ambitions, and people who loved her deeply. He had turned her fear into his justification, her independence into his breaking point. For Vanessa's family and friends, the pain was unimaginable. They sat through hearings, evidence, and testimonies describing her final moments. Moments that should never have happened. They described her as kind, funny, driven, someone who deserved safety, not the violence she endured. The attempted murder of the roommate, the killing of Vanessa, and the documented history of domestic abuse left no room for ambiguity in sentencing. Pequeen was held fully accountable, facing charges. That reflected the calculated brutality of his actions. What remains most haunting about Vanessa's story is not only the violence, but the silence before it. The way she tried to leave, the hints she dropped, the digital search she made in private. That small act says everything. She knew something was coming. She just did not know when. This pattern, the moment a woman tries to step away and a man refuses to let her, is the same thread running through every case in this series. A thread woven from jealousy, insecurity, and the belief that love is ownership. And in the next story, that thread tightens even further. The anger is the same, but the motive becomes something even colder. A boyfriend who chooses violence not only out of rage, but out of fear that the life he was building might collapse if the truth came out. November of 2022, Sanford, Florida. A humid darkness settles over a quiet residential complex as a car rolls to a stop near a row of parked vehicles. Inside the vehicle sits 17-year-old Kaylin Fiengo, a high school senior, a young mother, and nearly 9 months pregnant with her second child. She has come here hoping to talk with her boyfriend, 21-year-old Donovan Faison, a conversation she believes will calm tensions, clarify plans, maybe even bring stability back into a chaotic relationship. But the moment the car door closes, the night begins to shift. She does not know it yet, but she has stepped into the final minutes of her life. To understand the danger surrounding this meeting, you have to understand the dynamic that had formed between Kaylin and Faison. Their relationship was fractured. His attention drifted in and out, depending on his mood. Communication was tense. Friends said he was unpredictable, sometimes loving, sometimes cold. What Kaylin wanted was clarity. What Faison wanted was control. Kaylin was doing everything she could to build a future. She was preparing to welcome another baby, making plans for housing, for school, for stability. The night she drove to meet Faison, she believed she was taking a step toward resolving conflict. Instead, she was stepping into the path of someone who saw her pregnancy as an obstacle, something that threatened the version of life he wanted for himself. Investigators would later reconstruct what happened through messages, phone records, and witness accounts. Kaylin sent texts on her way to meet him, letting him know she was nearby. They spoke briefly in the car, but there was a shift, sudden, sharp, when Faison realized Kaylin was not going to agree to whatever narrative he had built. She was not going to simply do what he wanted. What followed was violence, sudden and irreversible. In the enclosed space of Kaylin's vehicle, Faison attacked her. She had no chance to defend herself. She was heavily pregnant, seated, buckled in, unaware the conversation was about to explode into something fatal. The details of the attack are deliberately limited in public reporting, both for legal reasons and out of respect for Kaylin's memory. But investigators confirmed she died inside the vehicle. Her unborn child did not survive. After the killing, Faison did not call for help. He did not stay with her. He did not show remorse. He hid her body by leaving the car at the complex, abandoning her in the driver's seat, and fleeing into the night. Hours later, officers responding to a suspicious vehicle discovered Kaylin's body. The scene was devastating. Her phone, her belongings, her messages, everything showed a young woman who thought she was going to talk things out with someone she trusted. Instead, she had walked into the hands of someone who saw her life, and the life of her unborn child, as something he could extinguish. The investigation moved quickly. Faison's name appeared immediately in Kaylin's last communications. Witnesses placed him near the scene. Digital evidence placed him with her moments before her death. And when police confronted him, his story shifted and fractured under pressure. During the trial, prosecutors presented a devastating narrative: a boyfriend who refused responsibility, a young woman who tried to resolve conflict peacefully, and a killing motivated by fear of consequences Faison did not want to face. What made the case even more heartbreaking was how young Kaylin was. She was 17. She was excited to become a mother again. She wrote about her hopes for the future. Her family described her as loyal, funny, bold, someone who fought through hardship with determination. Friends said she trusted too easily, forgave too quickly, and tried to see the good in people even when she had every reason to walk away. The jury deliberated, reviewed the evidence, and returned a unanimous verdict. Faison was found guilty of first-degree murder and the killing of an unborn child. Because of the severity of the case, the jury later recommended the death penalty, one of the rare instances where such a sentence was considered for someone so young. His final sentence reflected the gravity of what he did. Kaylin's family held each other tightly as the verdict was read. They spoke afterward about her courage, her love for her son, her dreams. They described the pain of knowing she went to meet someone she trusted, someone she believed she could reason with, only to be met with the darkest version of control a person can face. What makes Kaylin's story so haunting is the simplicity of her final choice. She believed a conversation could fix things. She believed calm could overcome tension. She believed the father of her unborn child would never harm her. But again, the pattern emerges: a breakup, a disagreement, a moment when a woman asserts her independence, and a man who sees that independence not as a boundary but as a threat. This pattern will appear again in the next case, but this time the danger builds over months, hidden beneath a carefully crafted exterior, until the truth surfaces in the most devastating way a family can imagine. March of 2023, Winona, Minnesota. A thin layer of frost clings to the early morning pavement as 26-year-old Madeline Kingsbury steps out of her home, holding her infant daughter in one arm and guiding her toddler with the other. She is exhausted. Anyone can see it, but she keeps moving, keeps smiling, keeps pushing through the strain of a relationship that has been crumbling for months. Inside the house behind her, 29-year-old Adam Fravel watches her with an expression no one can fully read. In less than 24 hours, Maddie will vanish, and the man who claimed to love her will become the central figure in one of Minnesota's most haunting cases. To understand the final hours of Maddie's life, you have to understand the pressure she had been living under. She and Fravel shared 2 children, but their relationship had deteriorated into something tense, controlling, and unpredictable. Friends describe Maddie as withdrawn, overwhelmed, worried about the future. Co-workers noticed the strain in her voice. Family members suspected something was deeply wrong. Maddie was trying to leave, trying to reclaim her independence, trying to give her children stability. And nothing destabilizes a controlling partner faster than the fear of losing control. On March 31st, Maddie and Fravel both dropped their children off at daycare around 8 in the morning. Surveillance footage confirmed it. They arrived together, but the atmosphere between them was flat, cold, heavy. They returned to Maddie's home shortly after, and according to Fravel, she later left the house in another person's vehicle, a claim investigators immediately doubted because Maddie never came back. She never showed up to work. She never responded to messages. She never contacted her family. She never picked up her children. For a woman who lived her life around structure and responsibility, this silence was impossible to ignore. By that afternoon, her family knew something was wrong. By that evening, panic had already set in. And by the next morning, volunteers were forming search teams across Winona County. Fravel stayed inside the home he once shared with Maddie, refusing to join the searches. When confronted by friends and family, he insisted he was being treated unfairly. He claimed he was the victim. He told investigators he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But his behavior only made suspicion grow. Inside the house, investigators found signs of conflict, tension, and panic. Outside, cameras captured a dark minivan, the same make and model Maddie drove, traveling along rural roads on the morning she vanished. The van stopped repeatedly near remote wooded areas. Hours later, the same van returned to town. Fravel admitted he used the van that morning. He said it was for errands. He refused to answer questions about where Maddie might be. As days passed, the searches grew enormous. Thousands of volunteers walked fields, forests, ditches, and riverbanks. They carried maps, marked grids, and returned day after day. Maddie's sister spoke publicly, begging for help. Her parents pleaded for information. The community rallied around them, refusing to give up. But Fravel remained silent. In June of 2023, nearly 3 months after Maddie disappeared, everything changed. A search team discovered human remains in a wooded area off Highway 43 in Fillmore County, not far from one of the locations where the minivan had briefly stopped. The remains were confirmed to be Maddie. Her body had been hidden deliberately, placed in a location that required intention, time, and local knowledge. Investigators announced that the discovery ruled out all possibilities other than homicide, and the community braced for what they had feared from the beginning. The next day, Adam Fravel was arrested. The charging documents told a story far darker than the public had known. Maddie had been planning to move out permanently. She had confided in friends about her fear of Fravel. She told family members she no longer trusted him. She was trying to build a life without him, and he knew it. Prosecutors alleged that Fravel killed Maddie inside the home that morning, then used the minivan to transport and conceal her body. He returned later, pretending nothing had happened, constructing a narrative designed to mislead investigators and shield himself from blame. In court, Fravel maintained his innocence. But the evidence contradicted him at every turn. The timeline, the van's movements, his refusal to participate in searches, the history of conflict in the relationship, and Maddie's own words to those closest to her. Friends describe Maddie as a dedicated mother, someone who adored her children, never missed work, never disappeared voluntarily. She was funny, ambitious, loyal, the kind of person who lit up rooms without trying. Her family said she had been trapped in a cycle of manipulation she could not fully escape, and in the end, the moment she tried to break free became the moment that put her in the most danger. That pattern returns again and again in cases like this. A partner feels control slipping, fear twists into anger, anger turns into violence, and violence becomes irreversible in the span of a few minutes. As Maddie's family continues to fight for justice, her children are being raised by those who truly loved her, people determined to protect the brightness she brought into the world. The next case follows the same devastating thread. Another relationship fractured, another woman pulling away. But this time, the man at the center of the story hides his intentions behind charm, confidence, and a carefully crafted mask, right up until the moment the mask finally breaks. April of 2020. 4. Henrico County, Virginia. A quiet stretch of suburban homes sits beneath the soft glow of porch lights as 36-year-old Allison Kate Laporta pulls into a driveway after a long day. She steps out of her car with the easy warmth her friends remember her for, a woman who worked hard, loved deeper than she ever admitted, and often trusted people more than they deserved. Inside the house, waiting for her, is Hui Max Nguyen, a man she met through friends, someone who presented himself as steady, ambitious, and charming, someone she had tried to end things with, and someone who refused to let her go. The fracture between them had been growing for months. Kate was pulling back, creating distance, sending signals he did not want to acknowledge. Nguyen responded with classic patterns of coercive control: constant messages, unexpected visits, monitoring behavior, a rising jealousy that seeped into every conversation. She tried to manage it delicately, the way so many victims do, hoping he would calm down, hoping things would de-escalate on their own. Instead, the tension only grew sharper. Friends later told investigators that Kate had begun expressing concern. She felt watched. She felt pressured. She felt like Nguyen's interest had shifted from affection to fixation. By early April, she was ready to walk away for good. Nguyen sensed it, and that sense became fuel. On the afternoon of the crime, Kate texted a friend that she was going to speak with Nguyen and finally settle everything. She believed closure would bring safety, a belief that appears in nearly every case like this, a belief rooted in the hope that reason can soften danger. When she arrived, Nguyen was already spiraling. Prosecutors later described him as volatile and enraged. Inside the home, he confronted her, demanding explanations, twisting narratives, framing every boundary she set as a personal attack. Kate tried to de-escalate. She always tried to de-escalate. She spoke calmly, according to evidence later shared in court. She reaffirmed her decision. She refused to back down. That is when the moment came, the one that appears in nearly every abusive relationship, the split second when a man realizes he can no longer control a woman who is leaving him. For some, that moment passes. For others, it ignites something catastrophic. Nguyen crossed that line. The attack was sudden, violent, and deliberate. He retrieved a handgun he kept inside the home, a weapon he had no legal right to possess, and fired at Kate. She was unarmed. She had no time to run, no time to call for help, no chance to survive. Neighbors later reported hearing a single sharp sound followed by silence. What Nguyen did next revealed the depth of his calculation. He moved Kate's body. He tried to conceal evidence. He attempted to hide the firearm. He sent messages to people as if nothing had happened. He created a timeline designed to mislead investigators, but the truth was already closing in. Within hours, Kate's family reported her missing when she failed to arrive at a planned dinner. Police conducted a welfare check, leading to the discovery that shattered everyone who knew her. Nguyen was located shortly afterward. When questioned, he shifted his story repeatedly, claiming a break-in, claiming confusion, claiming emotional distress. But none of it matched the forensic evidence. Detectives found the weapon hidden in the home. Shell casings matched, digital evidence matched, his movements matched, the timeline matched. There was no doubt left. The trial revealed the full picture. Testimony from friends showed a pattern of control. Kate's messages illustrated her attempts to separate from Nguyen. Forensic evidence tied him directly to the shooting, and prosecutors emphasized his attempts to mislead authorities immediately afterward. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, the courtroom fell into a kind of stunned quiet. The kind that emerges when a life built on kindness and connection is taken by someone who saw love as ownership. Kate's family spoke through tears about her generosity, her warmth, the way she supported others even when she struggled privately. Her friends described her as radiant, funny, devoted, and infinitely loyal. Nguyen sat expressionless as the sentence was read. Legal analysts later noted that his behavior throughout the investigation fit a classic profile. Someone who equates rejection with humiliation, who interprets boundaries as betrayal, and who reacts to losing control with violence. A pattern seen in countless domestic cases, but devastatingly clear in this one. And as with the others in this series, the most haunting detail is the same. Kate believed she could talk through it. She believed he would listen. She believed closure could bring safety. She did not know that she was already in danger the moment she decided to walk away. The next case follows this same chilling thread. A relationship strained to the breaking point, a young woman trying to leave safely, and a man who allows fear of abandonment to twist into something far more violent. But in this next story, the crime unfolds inside a home with children nearby, revealing a level of cold calculation that leaves investigators shaken even now. February of 2024, Paterson, New Jersey. A bleak winter morning settles over the city as 27-year-old Vanessa Santiago pulls her coat tighter against the cold, guiding her children toward the car. She is tired, emotionally stretched, and trying harder than anyone around her realizes to keep her life stable. Inside the apartment, she has just walked out of Stan's 34-year-old Fravel Torres, the father of her children, the man she has been trying to distance herself from, and the source of a fear she has kept mostly private. What happened next would leave an entire community horrified. To understand how the morning unraveled into violence, you have to understand the tension that had been winding through Torres and Santiago's relationship for months. Their connection had once been close, but over time, it fractured under the weight of arguments, mistrust, and Torres's escalating aggression. Vanessa tried to protect her children. She tried to keep arguments away from them. She tried to navigate the situation without triggering the behavior she feared. But by early 2024, she was preparing to leave permanently, and Torres sensed it. That morning, Vanessa returned to the apartment briefly after dropping her children off at daycare. She expected a quick, quiet stop, a moment to collect something, a moment away from the pressure. Instead, she walked into a room heavy with the kind of tension that makes the air feel too still. Torres confronted her almost immediately. Investigators later revealed that he had spiraled into jealousy and paranoia. He accused her of things that had no basis in reality. He believed her growing independence was an act of betrayal. Vanessa tried to calm him. She was not confrontational by nature. She tried to diffuse conflict with gentleness, a strategy many victims attempt when navigating volatile partners. She knew her safety depended on staying composed, but Torres was past the point of hearing her. His anger ignited not from what she said, but from the fear of losing control. The argument escalated rapidly. Torres grabbed a steak knife from the kitchen. Vanessa backed away. She tried to flee toward the door. The attack was swift, brutal, and deliberate. According to detectives, Torres stabbed her multiple times before she had the chance to escape. The violence was so extreme that the knife bent. Vanessa collapsed in the apartment, unable to call for help. Torres did not attempt to save her. He did not call emergency services. Instead, he made a decision that still haunts those who worked the case. He left her there, dying, alone. The next part is chilling. Torres changed his clothes, gathered the couple's 2 young children, and drove them to daycare, walking them inside calmly, pretending nothing had happened. Surveillance footage later showed him carrying the children with the same casual routine as any other morning. Parents and teachers had no idea that, at that exact moment, their mother lay inside an apartment barely clinging to life. After dropping the children off, Torres disappeared for hours. Police believe he was trying to decide what story to tell. He later returned to the apartment and called authorities, but by then it was far too late. Vanessa was found unresponsive, beyond any possible medical intervention. The crime scene told investigators everything they needed to know. There were signs of struggle. There was no evidence of forced entry. Nothing suggested an intruder. Everything pointed directly to Torres. He was arrested the same day. During questioning, Torres attempted to minimize his actions. He claimed the attack was spontaneous. He claimed he'd lost control, but prosecutors emphasized the facts. He retrieved a knife. He chased her. He He inflicted fatal wounds. He left the scene with the children. He behaved calmly at daycare. He returned only when he was ready. Those are not the actions of someone who simply lost control. Those are the actions of someone who made decisions, step by step. At trial, the jury heard from investigators, medical experts, and daycare staff who described the surreal normalcy of Torres's behavior immediately after the killing. The prosecution played surveillance video of him walking the children inside, footage that struck the courtroom silent. Friends and family described Vanessa as loving, devoted, the kind of mother who worked tirelessly to give her children stability. They spoke about her dreams, her warmth, her perseverance. They said she lived in fear during the final months, but never wanted to take her children away from their father unless she had absolutely no choice. Her trust and her hope cost her everything. Torres eventually accepted a plea agreement, sparing the family the trauma of a full-length trial. He was sentenced to decades in prison, but no sentence can erase what he took from those children. The loss of a mother, the destruction of a family, the permanent shadow of what happened that morning. And yet, even with all its horror, Vanessa's story echoes the same pattern as every case in this series. A relationship breaks down, a woman prepares to leave, a man refuses to let her go. The moment control slips through his fingers, violence erupts. The next case may be the most shocking example of that pattern yet, not because the relationship was longer or the conflict louder, but because the violence unfolded in public, inside a moving vehicle, with pregnant lives on the line and no time left for anyone to intervene. January of 2025, El Mirage, Arizona. The afternoon sun hangs low, turning rows of parked cars into blinding mirrors of reflected light. Inside, one of those vehicles sits 24-year-old Adeline Duran, heavily pregnant, her hands resting on her stomach as she speaks in tense, measured tones to the man in the driver's seat. 21-year-old Jose Gutierrez. What began as a conversation between partners is already slipping into something darker. Witnesses will later recall seeing the couple argue inside the car, voices raised, movements sharp. Moments from now, everything will turn violent. To understand the tragedy that unfolds, you have to understand the pressure Adeline had been living under. She was 8 months pregnant. She had been preparing for the arrival of her baby, working, caring for family, keeping her life stable despite growing turbulence in her relationship. Gutierrez, according to investigators and witnesses, had become increasingly unpredictable. He was argumentative, quick-tempered, and unable to accept decisions that did not go his way. The couple pulled into a parking lot outside a row of businesses on that January afternoon. The argument escalated rapidly. Adeline, trying to calm him, insisted she wanted to go home. Gutierrez refused. What happened next shifted from anger to violence without a pause. Investigators would later reconstruct the sequence of events through surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and the physical evidence found at the scene. The argument turned physical inside the vehicle. Adeline, trapped in her seat, unable to move quickly due to her pregnancy, tried desperately to defend herself. Gutierrez struck her repeatedly. He shoved her. He refused to let her get out. A witness saw the struggle and called police. Another person shouted for Gutierrez to stop. A small crowd began to form. Instead of backing down, Gutierrez escalated. He put the car in gear. He gripped the wheel. He pressed the accelerator. What followed was a violent crash that investigators described as deliberate and controlled, not a panic-driven accident, but an intentional act of harm. Gutierrez rammed the vehicle directly into a parked line of cars with Adeline trapped inside. The impact was so severe that it crushed the passenger side of the vehicle, pinning her against the interior with devastating force. The accident drew people running from all directions. They saw Gutierrez climb out of the car. They saw Adeline slumped inside, unconscious, severely injured. One witness later told reporters, "She never had a chance. She was just trapped in there." Police arrived within minutes. Gutierrez tried to claim the crash was accidental, but witnesses contradicted him immediately. Surveillance footage contradicted him again. And physical evidence from the crash, trajectory, speed, point of impact, made it impossible for investigators to believe his story. Adeline was rushed to a hospital. Her unborn baby was delivered through an emergency procedure. The baby did not survive. Adeline died shortly afterward. The news sent shockwaves through the local community. A young woman full of hope and nearing the birth of her child, had been killed in an act of rage and control disguised as a car accident. Her family issued heartbroken statements describing her as generous, dedicated, and excited for motherhood. Her co-workers described her as a bright presence, always smiling, always helping. She had plans, dreams, a life she was building, all taken from her in minutes. Gutierrez was interviewed at the scene and again later at the police station. His story shifted several times, but the evidence did not. He was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including second-degree murder. Prosecutors built their case quickly. Witness testimony, footage showing the argument, impact analysis, the severity of the crash, the loss of both Adeline and her unborn child. It became clear that the incident was part of a broader pattern. It was a man who could not tolerate losing control of a partner who was making decisions for her own well-being. Like so many cases in this series, the moment Adeline tried to assert her autonomy, danger followed. During preliminary hearings, prosecutors emphasized the intentional nature of the crash. This was not an accident. This was not a moment of misjudgment. This was rage transformed into a weapon. A car turned into an instrument of violence. A pregnant woman trapped inside. The courtroom was filled with grief. Family members wept as details were read aloud. Friends held hands tightly. At times, even reporters described the atmosphere as suffocating. Most devastating of all was the knowledge that Adeline had been seeking safety for her unborn child. She thought she could calm the situation with words. She thought she could reason with the father of her baby. She thought she could restore peace long enough to get home. Instead, she encountered the same fatal pattern we see again and again. A partner who sees independence as betrayal, a man who confuses control with love, and a moment when violence becomes the only language he chooses to speak. Gutierrez remains in custody awaiting further court proceedings. His charges reflect the severity of his actions, and the community continues to mourn the loss of a mother and the child she never had the chance to hold. And yet, as horrific as this case is, the next story takes us into a different kind of darkness. One involving deep mistrust, heated arguments, and the shattering fear of abandonment that leads a young man to make a choice that devastates not only his partner, but an entire community. January of 2025, Lauderdale Lakes, Florida. Palm trees sway in a warm night breeze as apartment windows glow softly across a quiet residential complex. Inside one of those units, 23-year-old Shanoid White Jr., known online as Gurla Lala, a rising TikTok creator with a growing fan base, sits beside her boyfriend, 28-year-old Morris Harrison. What begins as a private argument will end in a tragedy that leaves an entire online community grieving a woman whose life was just beginning to unfold. Shanoid was known for her bright spirit, her humor, and the raw honesty she brought to her videos. She made people feel seen. She made people laugh. She created a sense of belonging among viewers who connected deeply with her openness. But behind the scenes, her relationship with Harrison was strained. Close friends later said she had been frustrated for months, dealing with jealousy, emotional volatility, and a growing sense that she needed distance. Harrison, according to investigators, was possessive, insecure, increasingly unpredictable. He struggled with the attention Shanoid received online. He struggled with her independence. He struggled with the fact that other people admired her. And in the hours before her death, all of those insecurities collided. Reports from that night describe a heated argument inside the apartment. Shanoid had been preparing to leave. She wanted space. She wanted safety. She wanted clarity. And she believed stepping away would give her that. But in cases like this, the moment a woman decides to leave is often the most dangerous moment of all. Neighbors overheard raised voices through the apartment walls. The argument escalated quickly, becoming a storm of accusation, emotion, and desperation. Harrison's anger intensified at the idea that he was losing control, losing her, losing the version of the relationship he believed he owned. Then came the gunfire, a single shot, sudden, sharp, followed by silence. Neighbors called 911 immediately. When deputies arrived, they found Shanoid unresponsive, lying inside the apartment with a fatal gunshot wound. Harrison was still there. He did not flee. He did not call for help. According to the arrest affidavit, he made statements suggesting the shooting was the result of an argument spiraling out of control. But the evidence told a different story. Deputies recovered the weapon inside the home. Witness statements contradicted his shifting explanations. Physical evidence indicated deliberate action, not accident. And the timeline left no space for doubt. Harrison was taken into custody on the spot. As news spread, the internet watched in collective shock. Girla Lala had been a rising voice, warm, relatable, funny, and undeniably authentic. Fans flooded her comment sections with disbelief. Other creators posted videos grieving the loss of a colleague and friend. People who had never met her mourned the kind of person she was, vibrant, driven, full of potential. Her family described her as a light in every room. Her friends called her generous, loyal, fiercely protective of the people she loved. She was working, creating, growing, building a future that was stolen from her in a single moment of violence. The investigation into her death revealed a pattern familiar in so many domestic tragedies. Harrison had shown signs of jealousy. He had shown signs of emotional instability. And he had shown signs of escalating behavior in the days leading up to the shooting. Shanoid had started to pull away. That was the catalyst. She wanted out. She wanted boundaries. She wanted to reclaim control of her own life. And Harrison responded with the one thing that takes control away forever. In court, prosecutors detailed the argument, the weapon, the trajectory of the shot, the forensic evidence aligning with witnesses' accounts. They emphasized that this was not a momentary accident or a misfire. This was a deliberate act of violence committed during an argument that never needed to happen. Harrison, confronted with overwhelming evidence, was charged with murder. Additional charges followed, as investigators uncovered more details about the weapon and the circumstances of the shooting. At a vigil held days later, hundreds of people, friends, family, fans, gathered to honor Shanoid's memory. Candles flickered against the night air. Photos of her smiling face were displayed across posters and phone screens. People told stories of her kindness, of the way she could uplift anyone with just a few words. They remembered her not as a victim, but as a young woman whose life left an impact far beyond her years. And yet, even in the warmth of community mourning, the pattern remained just as stark as in every story we have told so far. A woman tries to leave, a man refuses to accept it, and the refusal becomes violence. Domestic violence experts often say that when a controlling partner senses freedom slipping away, they will do anything to regain it. For some, that desperation becomes catastrophic. The next case brings this pattern into sharp focus once again. A young, pregnant woman full of excitement for the future, and a boyfriend whose volatility brings an expecting life to a terrible stop. December of 2024, Gormley, Missouri. A cold winter dusk settles over a stretch of farmland as 18-year-old Kylie Montero steps outside the home she shares with her boyfriend, 23-year-old Gregory Groom. The wind cuts sharply across the empty fields. Porch lights flicker on one by one. Kylie pulls her jacket tighter around her shoulders, one hand instinctively resting against her stomach. She is pregnant, early, hopeful, nervous, and she has been carrying the weight of an increasingly difficult relationship with a man who shifts unpredictably between affection and anger. Hours from now, her family will begin calling repeatedly. Their texts will go unanswered. By morning, she will be gone. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand the weeks that came before it. Kylie had been struggling. Friends later told police she had seemed exhausted, overwhelmed, emotionally strained. Her relationship with Groom had become tense and volatile. Arguments flared easily. Control, jealousy, and anger crept into their conversations. Kylie's pregnancy only intensified the pressure surrounding them. Two young people facing an unexpected future that Kylie met with determination, and Groom met with growing resentment. On December 23rd, Kylie's communication suddenly stopped. No messages, no calls, nothing. Her family grew concerned immediately. She was young, but she was responsible. She always checked in. She always answered. By the next day, panic had set in. Family members tried Groom repeatedly. He avoided them. He dodged calls. He gave inconsistent explanations about where Kylie might be. He hinted she had left on her own, but nothing he said made sense. The search for Kylie intensified quickly. Friends and relatives canvassed the area. They went to Groom's home. They questioned neighbors. They contacted police. Her disappearance was treated as suspicious almost immediately. The contrast between her routine reliability and her sudden silence was impossible to ignore. While the community searched, Groom's story began to fracture. Detectives later stated that Groom provided conflicting accounts. He said she walked away. He said she ran off. Later, he said she might have been picked up. Nothing fit the timeline. Nothing aligned with physical evidence. Nothing matched the behavior of a young pregnant woman who had been planning Christmas with her family only hours earlier. As pressure mounted, Groom's demeanor shifted. According to investigators, he became nervous, agitated, unsteady. He agreed to speak with detectives, then changed his mind. He insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance, then contradicted himself minutes later. The breakthrough came when investigators noticed inconsistencies in the area surrounding Groom's property. Disturbed soil, freshly moved earth, signs of an attempt to conceal something. When confronted with this evidence, Groom finally broke down. According to the arrest affidavit, he confessed that Kylie was dead. He led officers to the location where he had hidden her body, a patch of ground near the home, covered hastily with dirt and debris. Kylie was found in a shallow grave. She had been murdered. Her unborn child had died with her. The discovery shattered her family, the community, and the officers who had hoped desperately for a different ending. Kylie was 18, a teenager with her entire future ahead of her. She had been preparing to become a mother. She had been trying to find her own place in the world. She had trusted a man who used that trust to take everything from her. According to court documents and statements released by law enforcement, Groom admitted he killed her during an argument. There was no claim of self-defense, no claim of accident, no coherent explanation. Just a violent act committed during a moment of rage and control, the same deadly pattern seen in so many of these cases. Investigators emphasized that Kylie had shown no signs of wanting to leave voluntarily. Her belongings were still in the home. Her phone had been turned off abruptly. Her plans for the holidays were set. She had been excited for Christmas, excited for her baby, excited for the future. The tragedy struck the community deeply. Friends described Kylie as gentle, optimistic, and thoughtful, the kind of girl who laughed easily and always tried to help others. Family members spoke about her dreams, her kindness, and the love she already had for her unborn child. Photos shared by those who knew her showed a young woman glowing with hope, unaware of the danger growing so close beside her. As for Groom, the evidence left no doubt. He was arrested and charged with multiple felony counts, including second-degree murder. His confession, the physical evidence, and the inconsistencies in his statements formed a case that prosecutors described as overwhelmingly clear. The courtroom atmosphere was heavy during preliminary appearances. Groom showed little emotion. Kylie's family wept as prosecutors described what happened. Reporters covering the case noted the stark contrast between the girl who had been full of life and the man who now stood accused of taking that life away. Domestic violence experts highlight Kylie's story as a devastating example of a pattern seen again and again. A young woman tries to assert independence, a partner reacts with fear and control, and the moment of conflict becomes the moment of greatest danger. Kylie believed the father of her unborn child would not harm her. She believed he was just angry, just overwhelmed, just struggling. She believed she could calm the situation, as she had tried to do many times before. But as with every case in this series, belief was not enough to stop a man who saw a partner's autonomy as a threat. The next chapter in this series continues that same chilling thread. Another relationship strained, another attempt to leave, another young life ending at the hands of a man who refused to accept the word no. The stories you have heard tonight are 10 different lives, 10 different relationships, 10 different warnings that so many people never saw coming until it was too late. And yet, beneath every detail, every timeline, every desperate message, and every argument that spiraled out of control, there is the same quiet thread binding them together. A moment when love was no longer love. A moment when a boundary became a spark. A moment when the word no felt to these men like a challenge they needed to extinguish. These women tried to leave peacefully. They tried to communicate. They tried to de-escalate. They tried to trust. And each time, control disguised itself as affection until the mask finally slipped. If these stories leave you with anything, let it be awareness. Awareness of subtle dangers, awareness of rising tension, awareness of what love is not supposed to feel like. Before you go, tell me something in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? And which case stayed with you the longest? And if you want more of these deep, quiet, cinematic explorations of real cases, make sure you subscribe, because the next story is never far away.